Hi, I'm Dr. Stacy Worley, and thanks for joining us for a Let's Talk discussion for my Brother's Keeper virtual relaunch. We have some great facilitators on storing for us today. I'd like to present them to you. First, we have Dr. Julius Beckham. He is the Assistant Director of Special Services at Huber Heights City Schools. We have Mr. Mandela Brown. He's a mental health advocate, and he is a senior at University of Cincinnati. We also have Mr. Steve Muhammad, who's also a community advocate, is joining us this evening. And our fatherhood champion, Mr. Sean L. Walton Sr. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining this Let's Talk series on mental health matters. I would like to recognize DPS Office for Males of Color, which I am the director of, who has been the co-sponsor of this MBK launch. And we want to just kick it off right now with this question I want to throw out to you, gentlemen, and just have at it. How do we, as Black men, have a discussion with our young men to let them know it's okay to not be okay?
I'll go ahead and kick it off. I think when we're talking about this day and time, we definitely want to be able to begin to open up the conversation. First, let me begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, and greet all of you in the greeting words of peace. We say it in the Arabic language of Assalamu alaikum, which is a prayer of peace be unto you. And I think one of the things that we need to begin to do is begin to bridge the gap between in our community between the elders, if you will, and our youth. They say the old man for counsel and young man for war. Of course, the war that we're engaging in is basically just building back up our community. And coming back into, if you will, our own culture, which is going to give us the ability to solve problems. Also, culture gives us a code of conduct. So I think that that's one of the things that we definitely have to do. Yes, sir.
I think, if my colleagues will allow me to go, I was doing my best to hold back, not to jump in, give other folks an opportunity. I think that we've got to model what we want to see. I always say young people can see better than they hear, much better. So being able to demonstrate a willingness to embrace of being ourselves and taking responsibility for our own mental health and being okay with it, being cool with the fact that I may not be okay all the time, being cool that that strength is a journey, not a destination, and it is an unstable journey. Sometimes you're going to be good, sometimes you're not, but they're up against a lot with society and society setting standards that are incredibly unrealistic for any human to stand up to, especially African-American men are expected to be a combination of things that are unstable when put together. And I'll talk more about that later.
Mm-hmm. I'll go ahead and add my 2 cents regarding to being okay with not being okay. One of the things is I want to go back to the model that my fellow brothers have started talking about as far as in raising your children. We do have to model them, but we also have to be seen. We have to be there in their midst in order to be that model and not to show them a false narrative of what society says a Black man should be. One of the things is we have a very large, let's say, media that is basically given to our children almost day one. And if you allow that media to overtake your child's mind, that's what their consciousness will become. And so you have to take that time and be that role model, that media of what a father should be, or what a brother should be, what a cousin should be as a man in order to teach that child to teach them those false, to basically teach them the truth rather than the false narratives that television a lot of times would teach them. Because bottom line, we know that a lot of those other, I should say, narratives are based on money, politics, etc., versus the raising of yourself, your awareness, and how to be critical thinkers, and also how to love your community.
Add my 2 cents as the youngest man on the panel. Thank you guys for your contributions thus far. I love that Dr. Julius brought in the subject of media. I believe of my generation, particularly coming up, social media has been hand in hand with our maturation as adults. And as Mr. Julius prefaced, social media basically gives you the opportunity to lie to yourself in a way. It allows you the opportunity to not be in tune with your own emotions. You can escape the realities of life within social media, but within that as well comes the pressures that come with social media. Going on social media, you become to weigh yourself up with other people. As a young person, you see one young person doing better than you, and you start to self-actualize and start to self-cause detriment to yourself in a way, because you're seeing all these positive images and you start to think, I can't relate to these, or this isn't how my life is going. So I believe that one of the steps forward is, along with being okay with not being okay, is being in tune with yourself and true with yourself and knowing the difference between reality and fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I guess. Yes, sir.
I would like to add. I would like to ask this question: what do you see are some of the barriers to getting the mental health care for our young boys and young men?
As a psychologist, we have a stereotype which a lot of us believe, and also we've been raised in our culture as well. It's a saying in the Black community: what goes in the house stays in the house. A lot of us have known this, been raised this, and been taught this. And for a while, to tell you the truth, it works under certain circumstances. When we had a support system, when your grandmother was there, your cousins was there, you could share that information internally and get wise counsel. But the issue is that the family dynamics has changed. You're not always in reach of a support system because we moved out to the suburbs or something else. And so you must try to seek help when you can't help yourself. And in many times, I should say, some things have changed. As myself, I'm a psychologist. We now have people in roles that look like us, have been in our shoes before, and could give us counsel towards our ethnicity. And so in some ways, a lot of times we have to think back and crush those myths that were in the past because they don't hold to the present that we currently live in. We got to learn in different ways in order to help ourselves that is safe for ourselves and also makes us grow.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And giving our, we have to, truly make ourselves available. And it's okay if you live somewhere else, but you better do something around the young people who are struggling most. Because I always say, that's with anything. That's with parent teachers associations, all that. We look at schools that are underperforming. We look at, young people who are not reaching out for mental health. Well, the reality is that the healthiest people, and money doesn't always equate health, but there's certain stressors that add to, lack of mental wellness, right? There's stressors involved. So most of the folks who have alleviated some of those stressors, that involves getting gone, right? Getting out. And I'm not knocking that, but when you're away and when you don't live in those areas, that's why I promote mentoring, right? I'm not only the fatherhood champion, I'm the mentor guy, right? Advocate and mentoring big time. To me, they go hand in hand, and we have to make certain that we're available, because one of the things, and we'll talk about, perhaps suicide and that sort of thing, but one of the interventions that improve all of the risk factors is having an adult outside of just your family unit to talk to. Like Dr. Beckham said, they used to live next door. They may not live next door anymore. And, our churches function differently now. And I'm certain we'll talk about that a little bit later. People kind of view our churches differently now, a great segment of the population. But the most struggling folks are all stuck together in the same communities. So therefore, they can't get out. So if you've got folks who are stressed, who may have unresolved issues, advising folks who are stressed, who have unresolved issues. right? So, but that takes a connection. So one of my suggestions is I always give a gripe. I always say there's a suggestion. Look for a local mentoring program. The Montgomery County Mentoring Collaborative or Mentoring Collaborative of Montgomery County, as rebranded a few years back, can connect you with a program where you can actually step up and be that listening ear for a young person. So that's one of the suggestions that where we can become more reachable.
I would have to say I'd agree, of course, with what everyone has said. I think that the males of color, I think that any organization that brings young men together that will help us to go through a rites of passage, that will help us to understand our history. You know, our history is very important because it lays a foundation and it gives us, see, a lot of times our young people are imbalanced because we have been given a distorted history. Many times our history begins with us being being enslaved, coming out of slavery, but we have a rich history. So if we lay that foundation, these organizations like Males of Color, the Nation of Islam, of course, with the FOI and the training there that brings us into manhood, that helps us to get some balance. And in these organizations, of course, there are individuals who young men can then go and turn to and get advice and get counseling to help them to find the proper footing, if you will, so that they can move forward successfully in life.
Thanks, Brother Steve. Some of the things I've noticed firsthand is altercations from the neighborhoods finding their way back into the schools with our young men. And how do we get more positive men to mentor or to speak to these young guys in a way that's not always in the school, but in the community?
They're there. Just bottom line is we just got to reach out and find them, because a lot of people are willing, that I found, that they have a heart for children. And if they can't be there 24/7 doing work or other obligations, we have to find times that they're available to talk with the kids, because everybody has priorities. And the thing about it, especially at those young ages, Dr. Worley, I know you know for yourself, they are hungry for it. Let me give you some experience with this. Since I work in schools, doesn't make a difference whether it's a suburb or urban. There's not that many men, black men, in those buildings. I will walk down the hallway first week of school, first 2 weeks of school, and the kids will hang outside the door just to figure out, who am I? Just because I'm a black man walking in the building. It would get so deep that somebody, you can hear them talking to their friends and saying, who is that? Is that your daddy? Is that your cousin? And it's so deep that someone will lie and say yes.
You know, what's really deep is that, tell folks, you know, because there's some science behind this. There's a science of sameness. Folks can look it up, right? It's a very real thing. So it's okay for people to want to be around and have some experience with folks who look like you. It's as simple as having some things in common, whether you enjoy the same music. You know, you don't always, you know, one of the major things in this country, and we didn't make it that way. So folks who are upset, why is it that way? I didn't make race and color be at the forefront of this country. This country made it that way, right? You know, we could erase that. That would be great, but we can't. And in that particular model, Black folks are forced into trying to figure out how to assimilate. And with all other groups of people, because we are at the extreme of that racial spectrum, it's easier for other folks to have an opportunity to assimilate. So it's like trying to enter something, right? Like imagine folks who have seen Double Dutch, right? Seen the game Double Dutch. You got two ropes, right? You twist in the ropes and you got a time to jump in. Or imagine if those ropes had razors on it. Not necessarily gonna kill you, but gonna hurt you real bad, right? So there's a certain amount of fear and there's consequence with jumping in, because you may be accepted or you may end up wounded, right? If you make the right jump. Well, imagine if perhaps we could somehow, you could swing not double Dutch, but quadruple Dutch with 4 ropes with razors. That's what it's like for Black folks, because we can't do those things. You know, we can't be the same on that spectrum, right? We just can't. You know, that's why so many Black folks try to assimilate, not because they hated being Black, just because there was a certain calmness. There was not as many things that you have to work with. So imagine what that's like, just existing every day, right? If you go to an appointment, having to move away from where you are, not talking right or wrong, but talking different. And I tell folks, bad grammar or misuse of the King's English isn't necessarily talking wrong. There's an appropriate time for an appropriate place, but there's a certain flow to my tongue. My tongue is a little thicker than everybody else. So if I try to talk in a European way, I honestly sound like a fool. So all the Black folks around us said, man, let you listen to this Negro right here, right? And so, but we have to try to fit into that situation, try to sit small, try to watch the tone of our voice and all that. So your very life is living in unbalance. So why it's so important to, you know, engage in what Doc said, be present, allow folks to see you, because it does allow a certain calmness. And if you're in the room in an environment, an institution environment, a school or other places, and you even come to, let's say there's a conference for a young person and their African-American mentor comes. Not only if you see the look on that child's face, the fact that that child's mind is more at ease, that parent's mind is at ease as well. So that's just an important thing for them to have opportunities to connect with people who look like them. And really quickly, to kind of really address Doc's question, those things that spill from the community into the school, honestly, Doc, we got to address it in the community, but we also have to make a space to address it in the school. There's no way. Those two things are too connected. Our young people spend more present hours in school than they often do in one place in their community. So we have to find a way to set up healing environments. First, acknowledgement that there are struggles, acknowledgement that there's violence and a value for human life, but set up literal ceremonies, literal convocations, those things that are intentional and consistent and timed, where our young people can know if there's a violent event, then there's going to be some folks from the community who will respond in conjunction and by authorization of the school to work and start to heal.
Right.
Just to piggyback real quick on Brother Walton, what he's referring to in the, I should say, the collegiate mind, where you might find it, and I'm going to say it in critical race theory, it's called double consciousness. And that is basically when we have to get in to fit in, but we also understand the language and the culture of where we grew up in. I am bilingual. I can go to college, I can go to school and speak with my white colleagues in the Queen's English if I choose to. Or if I go home, I can talk to Brother Woo Woo and we can talk anything we want to as we would like to speak. And we perfectly understand each other and respect that. It's not a diminutive, I apologize, my phone ringing, but it is not a letdown, or I am not seen as unequal as far as if I choose to use different language in that particular setting. It's because I am bilingual.
Yeah. Well, I'll jump in and say that I agree once again with what everyone is saying. And I think that, you know, our young people, they're looking for guidance. Many, you know, may not have any type of support mechanism at home. So like you were saying, Brother Sean, when we come into these environments where we're in school or organization, you know, young people, they're looking for guidance. And many times when we step to them, what we want to do is just drop a seed in their head. You know, sometimes, you know, when we're looking at brothers or sisters who want to help, just know that, you know, what you're doing is you're just dropping a seed in their head and you're allowing that seed to fertilize. You're not going to change a young person's behavior overnight. However, if you just, as we're saying, if you just be a model, a role model, and also you can drop a seed into their head, that seed will fertilize eventually. But I also agree with what you're saying, Brother Sean, is that, in a lot of these environments, we do need a place where young people can congregate and we can all talk and have a cipher, if you will, a healing cipher, because many of us want to, we're social beings and we want to be around other brothers, but we just need to have that type of guidance from adults. And I think that many adults who are successful, if you see a young person on the street, just drop a seed in their head. They will appreciate that. And don't be afraid of our young people. Our young people, many times we even buy into the propaganda that our young people are violent by nature, and they're not violent by nature. They're just looking for guidance on how to act. So I think that's one of the things that we need to definitely understand.
Brother Steve, I think you hit on something. We do focus on the fact that a lot of people are scared of our young people. And I think that's why a lot of times we make the excuse we don't have time for them.
Right.
I believe all these gentlemen, with the exception of Mr. Brown, were growing up in a time where you always found an elder black man or your grandfather or your uncle who was going to make time for you. He was going to come up to the school. He was going to go to your activity outside of the school. But we have gotten so consumed with what we hear on the TV or social media, what these kids are doing, we don't even want to fool with them. And we got to change that dialogue.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
like you say, I think each one teach one. If we each one teach one, if we adopt the old school, one of the things that we have to do as a people is we have to regain our own culture. They say it takes a village to raise a child. That comes from our culture. That doesn't come from Hillary Clinton. That comes from us. And what does that mean? It takes a village. That means that, if we can begin to embrace our own culture, then what we begin to do is we begin to set up an atmosphere within our neighborhoods, within our culture, an atmosphere that this behavior is wrong and this behavior is right. You know what I mean? So this is where I think there's a breakdown, because within our culture, which we really don't really have a solidified culture, a black culture. As many of us are saying, many of our young people are influenced outside of our community. They're influenced by the music, which is really the message in the music is being really dictated by external forces. You know what I mean? The television programs, Love and Hip Hop, and all of these type of programs. These are all programs. That's what they're called too. Programs. They're trying to program our children to act in a particular way, a self-destructive way. And so what we have to do is we have to, and this is why I say that any of us who are successful, who has some type of modicum of success, we need to just sit down and just drop a seed into our young people's mind and always encourage our young people to be the best that they can be.
Dr. Worley, you spoke on how the outside influence is coming to the school building. And we, as I should say, elders or older adults, we want them to respect that space. We come to assume that they should respect that space. The issue is that we are poor parents. Now, I'll get to the point, the reason I'll say why. Everybody's doing the best they can. Many times we were raised this: do as I say, period. Okay? But we don't take the time to go that next level. And that's what our children are looking for, is that next level, to teach them why.
Right.
Tell them why you should respect this space. And that provides a cognitive conversation and reflection upon themselves to say, is this beneficial to me or not? Because otherwise it's just because my daddy said so. And that doesn't mean too much, especially if your daddy ain't there. So you have to tell them why, so they can become a conversation, and so can have some dialogue regarding it. If they have some differences in it, you can still have a dialogue in it where you plant that seed and they might learn a little wisdom later. We want them to respect the school. Why? Because it's a place that they can gain some education, some knowledge that they can use for themselves and their future and hopefully their families. They can't get that if they're doing something else coming from the outside. Not just because it's a school building, just do it because I said so. We got to take that time to really teach our particular cousins, our nephews, our children, as far as the whys we do certain things and why we should do it, so they can build a cognitive conversation for themselves, so they can think on and reflect for themselves.
That's right.
I'm doing my best as an older man, the empath in me, doing my best to try to let young Mandela get in there, man. So I'm holding back, Mandela. If we got dead air, man, I'm telling you right now, man, it's because of you, because I'm loaded over here. My pad had made so many notes, but I'm just gonna give some air in there, man. So I'm just encouraging you. I know that you don't have to know everything, man, and I'm just saying publicly. That's another thing, but just you can chime in with your opinion, man. You know what I mean? And I appreciate the respect. But I'm a hold back, and but you better go, man, because old school Unc over here chomping at the bit, man. I'm ready. Man. So go ahead. I'm gonna pause, man. But at the same time, I'm not telling you have to jump in there. But I want to let you know that it's important to me what you have to say.
Yes. Yes.
So I'll add to the conversation a little bit. For those of you that don't know, I produced a documentary entitled King's Cry 2, a documentary focused on Black male mental health, particularly for young Black men and college students. And through my production, the one thing I learned throughout the piece was that images are extremely important.
That's right.
Images are probably the most important thing as a child that you can latch on to. You guys talked about it before, just the fact that you see another Black man in the room, it just gives you a sense of peace. As a young man myself, I unfortunately grew up in Centerville. Wasn't that many Black people out there growing up. Going to high school, there was particularly a guy named Mr. Shelton who worked with the special needs kids at the school. Talked to Mr. Shelton every morning because he was the only Black man that was wearing a tie that came to the school every day. And every time I would see him in the morning, he'd be like, "Hey, Black man," and he would pull me to the side, and we would have great dialogue about anything: sports, girls, life, faith, anything you can think of. And just to be able to decompress and feel like I was at home when I'm at school surrounded by white people all day, to have that relationship with him, to be able to feel comfortable, to be able to feel like I was being heard, to be able to feel like I could pull him aside when something happened in class, it was just amazing for me. So just to add to the conversation, images are very important for these young Black men. You have to be where they are. And like Dr. Julia said, you also have to give them the whys as well. Our generation is the very instant gratification generation. They want to have that instant information at their fingertips because that's what we have right here. So you have to give them that why. You have to explain the reasons for what you're doing. Because to be frank, our generation is very bent on, if it doesn't benefit me, I'm not going to give time to it. So we have to be able to take the time with these young men to explain to them the reasons why we're doing the things that we're doing, for sure.
Beautiful.
I love it. Not only add in to roll with y'all on that, on images that are there, but very open. I tend to smile. One of the things is that our young people have been incentivized and taught, and I'll say that a few times during our conversation, they've been taught and incentivized to build walls around themselves.
Right.
And being an outcast or isolated is toxic to mental health, to mental wellness. It's toxic. So on one hand, I'm incentivized to look mean. They took our whole smile. Literally took our whole smile. And that wasn't, well, that's just y'all culture. That's not our culture. That was incentivized through a music industry that would give record deals to guys who would rock gangster versus poor righteous teachers or even X-Clan, right? You can rock a gangster, you can rock, you're gonna shoot somebody up, but them brothers that was talking about walking through the jungle with my big black boots and wearing them African medallions and them kufis and all that, right? Who were aggressive in that way, that was put down. That wasn't promoted. They say people weren't buying that. No, that's not true. People buy what you market. That's the bottom line. We follow what the industries are. And our young people have been incentivized, truly incentivized, to create this grim look, right? You know, I would take pictures of young people. I'm like, okay, fellas, they'll be over there laughing, having fun. I'll be like, hey, fellas, let me snap this picture. Immediately they go for they will snatch them. They didn't took our whole smile. How great. Do you know the science behind what a smile does for you?
Right.
We just let them know that it was okay to smile, right? That's why I still smile, you know, everything, need braces and all that, I'm still gonna smile, right? Because when I model that and when I smile at the young men, and there's something about it, even as adult men, older men, we tend to take on some of what young people have. Like, we need to lead more and be more confident in ourselves. You know,
right.
How you young men doing? You know, man, come on, man, 86 that, you know, literally. You know, crawl up a smile. You might find that it make you feel that actually makes you feel better, because one of those things, a smile is inviting. You know, right. I would say it to young people sometimes. Hey man, don't let the world steal your smile, man. Yeah, I used to joke with them and I always say, hey, look, you know, we practiced our smiles growing up, man. We'd be in the mirror trying to see if we get that little dimple from the side and all that, man. We literally practiced our smile. That's how important it was. But I explained to them the why. Like, right. This is why, and this is what it does for people. So part of that modeling is being available, but also giving a smile. You know, speaking of, even if you firm, if you say, how you young men doing? You know, appreciate you young brothers. I do this a lot. I just do that when I go past. Man, they know what that mean. They could feel that. It's not always what you say. Sometimes it's what you do. When I come through the school, I'm doing this to the little ones. I'm hitting them with a thumbs up and a smile. I'm like, give them a little wink, right? When I come through the rest of them, what's up, man? Y'all doing all right? You sure? Right? And then, oh man, this guy's smiling. So that's one thing bringing it to us, because they've been incentivized to build walls around them through their image. So they've been incentivized to give this scary image, and it's worked. Unfortunately, their marketing has been the best marketing ever, because, you know, we're afraid of them at times, right? So part of that why, and educating them on, you know, kind of how that industry works. But it can't be healthy to have balance to, on one hand, be incentivized to be wealthy, to be marketable, to be liked, to even have young ladies like you, if you got this edge to you, right? So I have to live my life where I fake like a thug,
right,
like a gangster, fake like I'm cool, but don't go to jail, don't get killed, don't sell no dope. I gotta act like a dope dealer, but don't really be a dope dealer. But then in my own culture, be put down because I'm not really a dope dealer, and I'm just pretending like, come on, man.
Right.
Even as I'm saying it, we confuse just thinking about it. You know, we have to smooth out that, and we have to be courageous enough to what they call name the names, and tell young people that you're not just jacked up, man. You know, right. There's some people who laid this thing in work, and a lot of them have been big companies, the big record labels, decided that gangster rap, the most toxic things ever for our community, was going to put out there, and our young people are soaking up those toxins all the time.
And if I can veggie back on that, what you're saying, Brother Sean, is you're absolutely right. One of the things that we definitely don't want to do when we come around our young people is we don't want to change. We don't want to lower ourselves to where they're at. We want to keep our composure to where we're at. So because they're looking in truth, they're looking up to us. One of the reasons why why young people are they have that mean mug look, and they act and they seem to be very angry, is in all actuality is because they're scared. They are uncertain of the environment that they're in, so they're on hyper alert. So one of the things that we want to do is that we just want to just be ourselves, you know. So when we approach our young people, one of the things we have to understand is that they are not they are not what these images portray them to be. They're actually very scared, and they're looking for guidance. So one of the things that we definitely have to do when we're speaking to our young people is we have to as you're saying, speak, you know, with some confidence to them, but also we have to be very, very patient with our young people. We can't be impatient with them. We see their behavior, yes, and their behavior will change the more that we drop seeds on them and show them that, look, It's okay to be you. It's okay to be an intelligent Black man. It's okay to want to be better. It's okay to want to be better. So a lot of our people, you know, because you have what's called peer pressure, you have what's called conformity, right? So conformity is that we don't want to be the oddball, right? We don't want to be the oddball. But if you have to be the oddball in escaping a certain pattern of behavior, then we want to definitely recognize that young person who wants to escape and keep encouraging them to do and be the best that they can be. So like you're saying, Brother Sean, always, you know, at a certain point in time, you can get close to them. You can give them that, you know, that hug, bring them in close and tell them, man, you are drop that seat. You're doing an excellent job, young brother. Anything you need from me, you know, if you have to give them your number, you give me a call and we can sit down and talk. So I think that's some of the best things that we can do. So I agree.
I totally agree as well. I think some of the problem, I'm sorry, Dr. Beckham.
I got to jump in on this because it's some realism I want to be able to tell my young people who are watching this. Okay. I can't always smile when I want to. That's just the truth.
Yeah.
I cannot do it. In the past, it was both a coping mechanism for a Black man and also a survival instinct.
Right.
Right.
But I don't want my young men to take it as step and fetch it. Okay? I don't want them to take it like that. You have to learn when and where and what environments you can use your smile as a Trojan horse. Okay? I know that because of my appearance, my shade, that I am feared in certain circumstances and places. So therefore, I can't show my true anger the way I would like to. That would be me. I got to rein myself in. That's self-discipline. In which sometimes I might have to show a smile when I'm not happy whatsoever. But this is the key. As relationships grow,
that's it.
No matter where you're at, whether you're in a culture that's not yours, whether you're with people you don't know, you will grow and be able to know when I am able to show my true self and smile and be angry and be sad and cry. But you have to take notice of that relationship. And we as adults have to allow those relationships to blossom and grow so that those children can actually be their true selves and not be going stir crazy, holding themselves in.
Right.
Just to hop in real quick, just to bring us back a little bit real quick, because Mr. Sean said something I want to make sure no one misses. He was talking about when he comes into the school and he asks the kids, are they good? And then he said, are you sure? That was something that really stuck out to me because I feel like a lot of our young people are kind of just stuck on robot mode. Like you ask them, are they good? You're like, yeah, I'm straight. And that's the end of the conversation. And the conversation never gets had regardless if they're going through something or not. And so I just feel like that's something that we have to harp on, is really having that true conversation of not just the regular pleasantries of how are you doing, actually genuinely asking, how are you, specifically you, doing? And building that comfortability with these young people so they can open up to us. I just wanted to highlight that real quick.
Good stuff. I think a lot of times we speak to hear ourselves instead of to listen to what's really going on in the room. Mm-hmm. I want to piggyback off of something Dr. Beckham said earlier. We never tell them why, because we have so much damage at times internally that we don't know how to culturally seek competent care ourselves. And then we inflict that on our young men. And we really have to own that we have some damage and we need to get some help.
Mm-hmm.
That's real, man. I'm going to tell you, I wrote a note down here while you said that, Doc, and I was looking for a good place to get it in. And I'm going to take it right now, right? The why, right? First off, y'all know I love to have fun, right? You know, the whole thing, I get serious. I am the most natural flow. I get serious and have fun, but I believe in that. That why? One of the things where we don't encourage the why, we got to admit as men, Sometimes we don't know why. So we feel challenged, and we got to lead by example by saying, you know what? I'm not certain. Let me look that up, right? Like I literally went through the process of looking at why you take your hat off, why people took their hat off in the building. Because so often, take your hat off, young man. You know, this might be like, why don't be questioning me? Man, admit, you don't know. You don't know why. You just do it, right?
Right.
So starting to look at that. And so when young people, I say, hey, listen, here's the real reason why, which really doesn't make a lot of sense. It may not be the only reason, but if I'm the only person who's looked it up at the minute, if I'm the only person who's looked it up, or at least says that I've looked it up, and I put those facts out there, then I'm king of information, just like America has done. If they're the only ones who put information out there, and that's the only one you send as an expert, then they're king of information. So my king of information, and me looking it up, says that it was part of a kind of a pleasantry that was a European standard that when you would even come into a house, right? Now, there may be some other faith reasons, right? But we know there's some cultures who believe in covering your head. See? Okay, so, but in that environment, you would come in because if you visited somebody and you couldn't stay long, two things you did. One, you took your hat off and you took your coat off and you sat down to pretend like you weren't rushing away, like you were going to spend some time. So you took your hat off when you came in the building and you took your coat off. And I don't care if I stayed literally 30 seconds, I took that off because it was considered impolite in order to feel like he was rushing out, even if you were actually rushing out. Then after I would say that, I would be like, now that we know that, some things you do because it makes other people comfortable. But one thing about it is you are armed with knowledge. So you can take that hat without saying, man, these other people don't even know why we taking the hat off, because I'm going to take the hat off because there's no sense in me making other people feel unnecessarily uncomfortable because it doesn't hurt me to take the hat off. So the moral of all that story was sometimes we got to search for a why, and we have to sometimes walk through finding out why with young people. And because as men in general, we're expected to have the answer. We don't just not ask for directions because we don't want to ask for directions, because we're expected to be protectors, providers, and all that sort of thing, whether we can do it or not. And as African-American men, sometimes it's been very hard to be those things, right? Without sacrificing our own lives. I'm going to protect you. Like people say, well, black men don't protect black women. Let's go through our history. That's simply not true. Okay. If you look throughout the civil rights movement and whatnot, when they were sicking dogs on those folks, we weren't tossing women and children in front of those dogs, right? We were getting eaten, we were fighting, we were dying. You can look at the history of lynching and all of that. So, but when you try to take all that with you, that competency, and you try to make up for that, and you have to feel like you have to have all the answers, that's tough. That's wearing on you. And we have to be comfortable with saying, you know, please, I'm not only going to answer your question, I'm going to encourage you to ask me why. And when you ask me why, try to stump me so we can look it up together. Just taking that pressure off along with having to know everything add a lot to the lives of young people and the balance so that they can have a balanced mental wellness.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff, Sean. I think some of the other issues, just shifting gears, we focus too much with our young boys and as men as well in the sports arena on basketball and football. And we don't have dialogue with our young men about there are other opportunities, there's other sports out there that you can do exceptionally well with. And I think a lot of it has to do with we buy into what the media gives us. I had a dialogue with some young men a couple days ago in one of the schools that they weren't even aware of gaming with the NBA, with certain sports, EA Sports, where they can get major contracts just by gaming. And they were going to do the research and get back with me. So I was excited to have that dialogue, but that's just another venue of something that they can do. They're not basketball players. They never made it on any basketball team, but they have the skill set on a computer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's deep.
Yeah.
Dr. Worley, I'm going to put it back in experience we both had. It might not be sports. It might be band.
Yeah.
Okay. Something that they can grow in and learn and basically improve their cognitive skills with. It could be anything under the sun instead of focusing on what the media gives us as far as for football and basketball. We never would have had a Tiger Woods if somebody else wouldn't try something else.
Mm-hmm.
Self-esteem development is good for mental wellness. It's good for wellness. And, one of the things that, we kind of move away from that because nobody gets funding for that. See, oftentimes it's not that, are y'all money hungry? No, sometimes we money needing, and Black folks are still believing that if we increase in status and money, then somehow we're going to get treated better. Somehow I can keep my child alive if I live in a better neighborhood, that sort of thing. Not just from Black folks, but from white folks. I can get a different attorney, if I have a position of status, or I drive a certain car and I don't have golds or don't have earrings, I don't have all of those things that may make me look like a drug dealer, right? If I do this particular thing, somehow I can be more safe. Well, the struggle with that is we chase dollars, and folks never put dollars into programming that promotes self-esteem. I'm telling you, that should be the number one thing going. It helps academics. It helps athletics. I can remember when I set the bench the whole season in soccer, 7th grade. Literally, I don't think I saw the field one time except to maybe carry some equipment off, right? The next year, they let me in. I actually thought I could be pretty good, right? But I got in there, and somebody kicked the ball in the air or something. I was near the goal. Son just said, man, hit it with your head, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do a header, right? So I hit it, and it went in. I'm telling you right now, the reaction of that crowd changed my whole season. In fact, at the first game of the 8th grade year, I set the bench too, right? Or set the grass or whatever it was back there, right? But when I made that header, I'm telling you, yeah, I wanted to go in. I was planning on it going in, but I didn't know if it was going to go in. But when it went in, the reaction of people from me doing that, I'm telling you, I started every single game after that. I was Pele for one single year. Took a year off, it went away immediately. But for that one single year, just the roar of people, right? Me feeling good about that. When we look at the shift from basketball and football, and folks even shifting now away from football to basketball even. The shift keeps moving as I've talked to coaches and stuff. Why they move away from baseball? That's not what people promote. Like, you can't see me under this football helmet. I want y'all to look at me. I want y'all to be able to see me because I need to be seen, not because I have this high self-esteem. I had a doctor of psychology once tell me that the problem with the Black boys in our program was not that their self-esteem was too low, but that their self-esteem was too high. That's what he told me. So basically, they were fancy N-words. That's what it was, right? That's how he felt, right? And I explained to him, well, Doc, I've got a bunch of Black boys who are locked up back there, and who we have a beautiful courtyard with a basketball court, picnic benches, and all that. I've got Black boys who do not want to go outside out back because they're afraid they may get darker. They're Black, Doc. They're locked up. They'd rather be locked up in this incarcerated area and not go out back. Now, you tell me that it's because their self-esteem is too high?
Right.
Because we cannot let America set a standard for our young people's self-esteem. So that's what we need to do. If we work with self-esteem building, then young people can move into music. They can move into arts. They can move into these other things instead of chasing things where they're going to hear the roar and the rah of the crowd. And that's my story of why I was Pele for 1 year. And the same thing happened with everything else. I switched to sports because people were no longer showing up at speech contests.
Right.
Period.
Right.
I mean, imagine where I might be today. Y'all might not be checking out Steve Harvey by himself. You might be checking out Sean Walton. It's not too late, but the moral of that story is my life has been moved by self-esteem, and your life has been moved by self-esteem. And if we real as Black men, we're gonna do whatever people give us props for. If we can't play a lick, if the girls are cheering for that, we're gonna get out there and at least try to get a jersey.
Right. I would like to veggie back on what my brother has just said, and that is that, even when we look at the schools, I think one of the things that we need to begin to do is we look at the athletes and they get so much props in school. But what we need to begin to do is look at those honor roll students. And I see it online. I see us doing it, but I think it needs to be also really done and propagated in the schools, instead of highlighting that young man or that young woman who made the touchdown or who made a goal or whatever. We definitely need to begin to highlight those students who are doing well. We need to highlight those students who are doing well to encourage other students to do well as good. Because like you're saying, Brother Sean, one of the things that motivates you to be an athlete is getting that accolation, getting that applause, getting that recognition. And so when I think that we can begin to recognize those young people who are not only achieving well, but even giving recognition to young people who are acting properly. You know what I mean? I think that we need to encourage, inspire, and motivate our people in those type of ways and take the stigma of being a so-called nerd, right, out of the equation to make the nerd a thing that is in fashion instead of out of fashion. So I think that that's some of the things that we can do as well in our community and in the schools.
Brother Steve, I agree with you. I think though sometimes in the family unit, whatever that looks like, and I've heard this occasionally, some parents say when the student makes an honor roll, well, that's what you're supposed to do. That's your job, and they don't make it a big deal.
Right.
And so the student doesn't push themselves hard because if mom or dad or grandma is just saying, well, that's my job, that's what I'm supposed to do. They don't expect the school to do anything different.
Let me jump in on that just a little bit. For those students who are internally motivated, they can do that. Okay, they can get those A's. That's their expectation. The parents don't have to give them no pats on the back, etc. Very few students are internally motivated to try to achieve at something where they don't have prior knowledge or an ability to.
Mm-hmm.
Those who need that external motivator, like the most of us, we need that coaching. We need that positive reinforcement to basically build our self-esteem up. And so that's why it's very important. And Dr. Worley, I want to, you just triggered something, and I'm about to throw a wrench in it. We're all Black males here talking about how to raise our young Black men and to basically make them prosper. I'm going to let everybody know a secret to it. Although we are the primary person that person is looking up to, we are a male. We are that person they're emulating, they're modeling after. We have to work with the mothers in order to build the highest capacity for that child. We cannot do it alone. Otherwise, we will have an incomplete parenting project for a child.
Exactly.
Now, that's coming off of the Black males of color saying that we need to learn how to work with women in order to build the best child to grow. It ain't easy. And that's why a lot of times we ignore it.
It's real.
That's real. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times we have some broken units and we don't want to work with the mother or the ex because we have drama and tension between them. And we got to get past that and what's best for the child.
Whole child. It's hard to it is hard to be a complete person. Impossible to be a complete person. And you may be a functioning person. Like, if you got a car, that thing will run without hitting on all cylinders. It'll move. You have a bad spark plug, right? And it's still gonna run. It's just not gonna run right. So what I like to try to remind folks is, mothers and fathers, that I can't be a whole person hating half of myself or having discourse with half of myself or being uncool with half of myself, because whether you know it or not, or willing to admit it or not, bottom line, y'all went half on a baby, literally. So genetically and all that, you can run into young people who literally have never met their father. I've met young people where I knew their parent and had never met their father, and I'm like, whoa, wow. Not only do they look like them, they have mannerism like them, right? They may like some of the same things. So imagine that if there's a person, and oftentimes, it is the father that has been kind of talked badly about. Some of them have been good dads, and some of them have been bad dads. I'm not disagreeing that there's been some bad dads out there, but there's a lot of good dads out there, and there's also some dads who, mental health wise, couldn't handle the relationship that they were in. There's been some dads who fled to the pitch of the roof, to the pitch of a mountain, to get out of a situation where they feel like they wasn't going to be healthy and free, right? Mm-hmm. Some being headed out of the situation for the safety of all involved. They just couldn't take it. Now, the child doesn't see that. But I encourage the mothers to also be willing to work with the men for the good of the child. You don't have to admit that you're imperfect or anything like that. Dad doesn't have to admit that he's imperfect, but just to say that we're going to both take half the responsibility of the fact that we decide to have a child together. And are we going to do everything in our power to make certain that we come up with some agreement, not based upon how we feel. That's what books are important. Dr. Naim Akbar, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I think we got something in the chat there. Dr. Naim Akbar, Juwan the Kinjufu. Just go ahead and look up a few of those things. The conspiracy to destroy Black boys and things like that. Oftentimes I tell some of the ladies and the men, because oftentimes men, we've been indoctrinated with stinking thinking, right? Stuff that basically is deceased thinking that does not produce life for us, but we take that because we've been taught it. Well, the way that y'all can get rid of some of y'all arguments and debates, read something together.
Right.
Man, woman, father, mom, whether y'all read the same book and discuss the science and the research and relevant research. We've got Black authors, another book written by a white guy, but it is incredibly complete, called The Boy Crisis by Dr. Warren Farrell, called The Boy Crisis. It talks about boys not having purpose right now. And that's why you see a lot of male depression going down, because they don't have a sense of purpose. So just something to think about. Read together so that you're not arguing opinions. You're never going to agree on an opinion. But maybe if you arm yourself with knowledge and information, you can come up with a plan based upon facts to raise your children.
Yeah. If I could jump in, I definitely agree with what brother's saying. I think, and I got that book, of course, I'll hold it up, The Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. Also, an author that I would ask people to look into is the late, great Dr. Amos Wilson. He did a number of powerful books. Here's one called Understanding Black Adolescent Male Violence. One of the things that I think that we have to begin to do is, a knowledge of self builds a love for self. A knowledge of self gives us perspective, and it gives us context to our behavior. So sometimes when we talk about, bad dads or bad moms, really they're not bad. Really what it is that they were shaped by the circumstance and the culture. And I think that when we begin to put things in context, then the young person can understand that they can begin to look at their mother or look at their father in proper context or in the proper light and say that, they were to some degree a victim of their circumstance, And so I think that once we gain that knowledge and give that knowledge to our young people, they can begin to once again have a firm foundation to build themselves up on. So I agree with that. Books are important, especially books that give us a knowledge of ourselves.
Definitely have to agree with the need for books as well. Just to give a quick story, growing up with Barack Obama coming into the presidency, that was one of the first books I read that was by an African American author was Dreams of My Father by Barack Obama, and seeing the journey that he took growing up in a predominantly white environment, having to have identity as a black man, going through that journey of self-actualization was huge for me. Reading books that made me feel in tune with myself as a black man, showed me what a real black man was, regardless of what was on the TV, seeing statistics, seeing the truth on paper of the things that black men have done in this country and throughout the world, the contributions that we've given, basically building this nation with by our own backs and by our own brains as well. But it's not talked about in the media because they don't want these images to be seen, as I spoke on images earlier. So definitely pushing for these young men to read these books is extremely important as well, because there's so much information in these literaries that they would never see on television.
That's right.
I would like to give the advice to not just young men, but us old ones as well, is that any media, whether it be books, television, radio, whatever, we will find some wisdom and knowledge in those particular resources. And a lot of times they can be life-changing.
Right.
But I would tell you this as a word of advice. Go through those particular medias with a critical eye. Glean those things that are good for you and throw out the rest that's bad for you. Because although we're throwing up all these authors and everybody else, I'll just be very frank about it, is that they were written in a very purposeful perspective. Okay? And so bottom line is, I want to say everything you read in a book is not for you, but take what is good for you.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Ooh.
Very, very, very good. I had one thing that I wanted to add is a couple of things. One is we're talking about wellness, and I think we're throwing out a lot of solutions as well. I think that's super, super great. That we're solutions are really important, but also not ignoring people, because we look at the extremes. People talk about the middle child syndrome in the household and that kind of stuff in the family. But bottom line, you also have the middle child in schools, middle child in society. You got middle children. And a lot of the middle children are isolated and alone because they're not outstanding. So they're not great athletes or great at academics, right? Or they're not tearing the school up, right? Or tearing the community up. So we focus a lot on those two extremes, and that middle child is in here just waiting for somebody to blow one way or another. They're like a bubble, right? Depending on what environment blows the most, that's where they're going, because we all have a need to belong. So I just say, as we focus some of our attention, make certain that we, just continue to, like Doc said, one is tell you everything. I'm not moved by a lot of information, because a lot of things people tell us about ourselves after studying us, but we already knew that stuff. So they'll twist and turn that information to fit their narrative, whatever narrative that is. But whatever method you use, whether it's reading, you got YouTube, and I always say, look at the sources, look at people who pay for certain studies. But I don't care what you do and how you do it, include the full spectrum, that middle child. Our whole society has a middle child in it, right? The school has a middle child. So consider the middle child in our environments, and are they doing well? Because oftentimes we do know that young people can be high performers and really be suffering mental health wise. We know that because there's a certain stress to being a high performer, right? You've gotten sometimes so much praise for being a high performer, to come down off of that thing is like, oh, I would have did better not to be successful. So we know that that's crushing, right? And we know the person at the bottom, sometimes they can decide, well, it's more comfortable to stay where I am. When I was tearing stuff up, people know what to expect from me. I can't promise that I can stop tearing stuff up consistently, right? So go stay down there and continue to stay true to what I think is myself. But just don't forget about that young person in the middle, that feeling of isolation, of having kind of no purpose, can be incredibly devastating.
And as we wrap up, I encourage everyone to read something and then, you know, throw it out. But I also want to encourage everybody to write, do some self-reflection, do some journaling so you can go back and learn a little bit more about yourself, where you were last month and where you are at the end of this week. I encourage all you brothers to keep doing what you're doing as we are propelling and bringing our Black brothers and even our sisters together. I want to thank Dayton Public Schools and Office of Males of Color for sponsoring this event, and my Brother's Keeper Initiative, which is this virtual relaunch that we're having right now. And I cannot forget the Dayton African American Cultural Festival, who's been one of our sponsors as well. It kicks off this weekend, and that's why we did this relaunch as well. And simultaneously at 12 noon tomorrow at Island Metro Park. And don't forget the events that are taking place on Sunday at 11 a.m. till 6 p.m. at Island Metro Park as well, which is 101 East Helena Street. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. Beckham. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you, Mr. Walton and Mr. Muhammad, for joining us as we continue to have these Let's Talk Mental Matters series throughout the rest of this year, and doing more things for my Brother's Keeper Initiative in the Dayton community. Thank you to all our viewers for timing in with us today, and just stay connected with us, and we will share the next upcoming events.
All right. Thank you, brothers. Appreciate it. All right.
Thank you.